It is now 5 after 4 Central Time. I want to thank those who are in attendance for our July T-Mug, Trend Micro user groups. I appreciate everyone who has shown up or will be showing up for today's particular discussion. Today we'll be talking about TXOne and how it can help benefit your environments that might have IoT, IIoT, so on and so forth. Austin and Michael can explain it a whole lot better than I can. As always, though, if you have any questions or comments you need to make during the discussion, please feel free to utilize the chat or Q&A sections of Zoom. Hopefully soon, as I mentioned in the past couple meetings, we'll be able to start getting to physical meetings where we can all see each other face to face. But in the meantime, we will continue to hold these virtually just for safety and health of everyone involved. So with that, I'm going to pass the floor over to Austin and Michael, who can introduce themselves and introduce us all to TXOne. Michael and Austin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Real quick, just a little housekeeping thing. Is the presentation being shared?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Just wanted to make sure before I started talking and found out that wasn't sharing.
Not a problem.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Michael Drager. I am a red team engineer with Trend Micro. I have worked with the TXOne products throughout the year, a couple of years here since we've had this, and we'll go into a high level of what this is, what TXOne is, and what products we offer, and how it fits into the manufacturing or other OT type environments. Austin, you want to do a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Austin Byers. I've been with Trend since 2014. Started out in the engineering side as far as helping to build out some labs for the support centers. Then I went over to support deep discovery for a while. And then in 2019, I joined the TXOne team. And now I'm the director of engineering for TXOne, and it's been fun so far.
Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and get started here. To start off, what we need to do is lay out what the difference is between an IT and OT device. We see computers in the OT realm. We see computers, obviously in the IT realm, but they serve two different purposes and have two different functions, and they are whole different environments. In your IT environment, these are basic multi-purpose machines that run Office, video conferencing, spreadsheets, whatever necessary to run day-to-day operations of a business. They also typically are usually the latest OSs, so Windows 10. They get rolled over very quickly throughout the years. Most of them have internet connectivity. And if there happens to be a loss in network connectivity or some latencies that cause some interruption in business, it's not going to typically cause a lot of problems, maybe an inconvenience for some people because an email may not go out or whatever. But for the most part, it is not something that's going to cause an issue if there's an outage. Same thing, these systems are typically patched, or we hope they're typically patched. And confidentiality on those machines is top priority. So a lot of them do have encryption, and they do support to keep the data files safe. Now, when we roll over into the OT environment, these are similar machines. However, these are mission critical. These machines are important to the day-to-day operations of the manufacturing facility itself, as far as productivity. If there is an outage, we're talking, we lose one machine, that could be days or weeks worth of outages and lost production time. They are often legacy systems, not upgraded very often, because a lot of these manufacturing environments, it's very costly to upgrade the controllers and all the stuff that's on the floor. And if they do the upgrades, if they upgrade the machine, that machine may not support that older infrastructure that still exists. Many of these environments are air-gapped or pseudo-air-gapped. They don't really have internet connectivity. And typically, they are not patched. And if they are patched, it's only during a very small maintenance window that may exist. The top priority in these environments is availability. That's their main function, and that's all they really care about as far as the data. They don't, they're having it encrypted, or the confidentiality is low priority to them. The fact that it's available is the most important piece. Now, when we talk about OT, we have to think about the environment differently. We have to look at something called the Purdue Model, which breaks it down into different levels. There are 6 levels typically in a Purdue environment. There are 6 levels in a Purdue model. The very top level, 4 and 5, is where your IT infrastructure exists. Your servers, your workstations, your day-to-day operations, mail server, everything exists in the 4 and 5 levels for the IT realm. Now, when we get into the OT realm, that's where levels 3 through 0 fall into play, and each level covers different aspects of it. So like in this graph, you'll see level 3. This is going to be your operations, where the main servers for the operations are, where the historical data is stored, the management servers are there. And then we start moving down to the next level, which is the actual control systems themselves, the HMIs, scanning systems, PLCs, all the connectivity. And then we get down to further and further, all the way down to level 0, which is the actual machines themselves. So that's kind of how it breaks down. Now, Trend fits into 2 different aspects of it. Trend Micro will fall into, all our products will fall into the level 4 and 5 realm. Now, when we get below 4 to 3 through 0, that's where the TXOne products are specifically designed to fit in and protect these specific environments. Many of our competitors, or many products out there that are used in the OT environment, are actually designed for the IT realm and don't really fit well or plug in well into the OT environment. This is where the TXOne solution really fits into this environment, and it's built for those environments. Pardon. Now, over the years, we have seen many attacks on our manufacturing, and this is actually going to grow. And there's some really, we'll call it disturbing facts about IT security. Is the number of legacy systems out there is just astronomical. This graph shows, that 60% of those manufacturing systems still have Windows 7 out there. There's even some that still have Windows 2000 and Windows Vista that still exist in these environments. And like I said, these to upgrade these OSs is very costly and time consuming for some of them. And even if it may not even be possible if the machine is not, has not been upgraded, or there has not been any additional changes to the controllers or the PLCs. So they may not even be able to upgrade that machine because there isn't any way to make those changes or put a newer OS to support it. Threat actors know this, and they are actually targeting these environments. And we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of ransomware attacks in the manufacturing realm. Now, over the years, we have seen in the past, let's back that up. In the past, OT environments were completely separate. There was no connection to the IT realm. There was no connection to the outside world. These all existed into their own little, infrastructures, and they were managed all internally, and typically were completely isolated from the world. Over time, we've seen more and more of these environments being integrated or connected to the internet, to the internal LAN, into the internal networking, and connected to the world either through Wi-Fi, the network, or whatever, which is allowing some of these threats to be introduced into the environment and exposing these devices to all the threats that are out there.
So based on your previous slide then, Mike, is there any kind of overlap for protection between typical Trend Micro products and the TXOne level of products?
Overlap between, I'm sorry. Go back.
The products themselves are like the typical Trend Micro products such as Apex One, Cloud One Workload Security, Deep Discovery. Is there any kind of overlap between those products and the TXOne products? Could TXOne products perhaps protect some of your IT environment, or conversely, is there any kind of overlap where the traditional Trend products might be able to protect your IoT or OT type environment? There's a delineation, but I didn't know if there's any kind of overlap.
There is a little bit of overlap where we could bring in an Apex One agent, especially if we're talking about a system that's not that old, say like a Windows. Someone has a Windows 10 machine out there on the floor running a machine, a PLC, or they're using a server 2008 or 2012 to manage something. They could bring in deep security to help protect that server. And then vice versa, when we're talking about, it's Stellar now, I believe. It used to be called SafeLock Stellar, right, Austin? Stellar One. Yeah. It's our application whitelisting program. We could actually bring that up into the IT realm and protect kiosk type machines, or it could be used to protect ATMs and things that use standard OSs that may or may not be mission critical in the IT realm, but need some kind of solution that's easily managed and can be locked down and kept independent.
But all this kind of requires, kind of hinges on the fact you need to be able to install something on it. If you can't, it's still going to be TXOne, right?
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Now, over the years, we have seen multiple different attacks on critical infrastructure. And as you can see from this graph, starting back in 2010 with the Stuxnet, and over time, more and more, we're seeing more and more of these different attacks coming from either nation state or just even just regular everyday hackers just trying to one up or take something down. A good example of a recent attack would have been the gas pipeline in Texas that was recently taken down by a ransomware attack. Now, over the last year alone, we have picked up, we detected 127 new ransomware families. This is, can't really see that graph right now. Anyway, 27.
What was your question?
Austin, could you just remind me here? Is this just what was picked up in the OT space as far as the new families, or just in general?
Yes.
Remember what this one is?
Yeah, it was OT as a whole and ICS systems.
Thank you. That's I drew a blank there. Thank you. I wanted to confirm that. So yeah, just in the OT space alone, we picked up 127 new ransomware families just in 2020 alone, and I am pretty sure that this year that we're going to be seeing a similar trend or even more showing up this year, just in the number of attacks that have occurred just over the last 6 months. As you can see, the top 10 ransomware families we hear a lot about, like WannaCry, Rourke, Grand Crab. All these things, these keep popping up and reemerging as different variances as the threat actors adjust and make changes to it and reattack these environments over and over again. And we're going to see some of these show up again and again this year as well. With that, I am going to hand this over to Austin and let him talk about TXOne, unless there's some questions.
All right. Thank you, Drager. Yeah, so kind of to expand on what Drager was speaking on, to a little bit of a history lesson to the threats that we've seen previously, especially spreading into the OT environment. So when we saw back in 2016, the people at Trend saw how the threat landscape was changing to go after these more vulnerable environments. So some very smart people knew that we needed something to protect these OT environments and these very vulnerable machines, right? So, and there wasn't much out there to protect them. So, as Drager spoke on a minute ago, Trend Micro has been doing IT security for 30 plus years. And so we needed a product suite that would be able to protect the customers that have both IT and OT. And so this is where TXOne comes in. And TXOne is an entire product suite that was specifically built for OT machines and understanding the challenges that come with that. So availability is key. Our security solutions have to keep the operations running and prevent downtime. While doing that, our solutions cannot impede the operations of what those OT devices are doing, what their main function is. So on the network side, or our network products, we need to make sure that we're extremely low latency or even no latency, while giving visibility into what the OT assets are doing. On the endpoint side, our software has to be using the least amount of system resources on the assets as possible, since a lot of these devices are legacy or just just lacking on system resources, and then also support all of the legacy operating systems that we might run into. We have to do all of that by being adaptive, and actually being adaptive is kind of the unofficial slogan for TXOne. We have to be adaptive to all of the individual customer needs and policies that we might run into across all the different verticals. And this is why the TXOne suite is so diverse, to be able to provide custom protection for every environment that we might step into. And so again, the TXOne product suite consists of 7 different products, 3 network, 3 endpoint, and 1 management. Can you go on to the next slide, Traeger? So we'll start with the network devices, and I'll kind of keep this kind of brief. There's a lot of different individual features to these devices, but for the EdgeIPS, which is this one down here in the corner, the way we would kind of differentiate why you would pick one network device over another is based on their form factors. So these 2 devices are probably the most versatile, and they're very ruggedized devices. So we can pretty much put this in any harsh environment that you would throw at it. As long as it's not underwater, it should be able to handle it. So they can handle extreme temperature ranges, whether it's extreme hot or extreme cold. Also, they're fanless, so they can handle any dirty environment, and they're also shock and vibration tested. And then all 3 of the network products have a lot of features in common, things like monitoring and prevention modes, threat and vulnerability protection, asset detection, virtual patching. This is a big one, as a lot of our customers are running either legacy operating systems or even newer operating systems that are still on the base builds. So with virtual patching, we're relying on these edge devices to protect the machines that can't protect themselves from those known vulnerabilities and exploits. Also, past what we're doing on the vulnerability side or the malware protection side, we're also locking the network down to those machines and keeping it to what those machines should be doing and who has access to them. So on, we're able to lock down who has access to these machines based on IP and controlling who can make changes on these machines. Then on the protocol side, we handle protocol in 3 different ways. So the first way is just to identify what protocols are on the network, and just saying, what's out there in the ether. The second way is on the filtering side. We're just doing basic filtering, seeing what protocols are there and filtering out the ones that we don't want there and allowing the protocols that should be on the network. And then the last way is more specific to an OT device, and kind of separates it from a typical IPS or firewall that you would see on the IT side, is the protocol filtering or the advanced filtering for ICS devices or OT devices. So we can dive down into the system commands and the actual system code of the OT protocols, specifically like say Modbus, that is very prevalent with PLCs. Well, we can say who has read and write privileges. We can say what PLC or what machines can have the ability to send commands to these machines, and what commands they're able to do. So this helps to prevent against harmful commands that aren't necessarily malicious, which is very prevalent within OT. And so when we're talking about deployments, I would say the EdgeIPS, which is the smaller one down here in the corner, that's about the size of like maybe 2 decks of cards. But with the EdgeIPS, speaking back to the Purdue model that Traeger showed you a second ago, you have the ability to deploy from, say level 3 at the switch level, all the way down to level 1, either right in front of the machine or in the cabinet of the machine that it might be protecting. So as you can see, it has 2 ports on it. So typically you'd want to deploy this inline. So the bottom port would be your incoming connection or your upstream connection, and then port 2 would be your downstream connection. And so there's a couple different ways you can deploy it. if you look at that topology right above the device, you could put it above the switch and then have it protect an entire machine group or a certain VLAN or certain production zone. And that one device is built and configured to protect that entire environment. Or if you're looking more for wider and more coverage with many devices rather than just one, you can deploy the EdgeIPS right in front of the machine that is protecting and get your one-to-one protection for all of the devices within the environment. So most of the customers that we work with kind of like a hybrid scenario of both of those, just depending on which devices are more critical and which devices are less critical, so you can do machine grouping for that. Now the EdgeFire, this is more for the level 3 or level 2 of the network. You can have it doing the segregation between IT and OT, or if you want to deploy it lower in the environment, you can use it to do further micro-segmentation and separate the environment into different VLANs. It does have some more routing capabilities like a typical firewall would have, so you can set up some NAT rules or, again, do some further network segregation. But also, it gives you the ability to use those 8 ports to connect your OT machines to. So if any of those devices are talking together or talking laterally, it'll give you your east and west protection along with your north and south. So when infection does start at the lowest point of the network, it'll stop the spread from spreading laterally or even vertically. Go ahead to the next slide.
So you mentioned no underwater yet. Is that road mapped? We're gonna be able to protect like submarines and stuff.
Yeah, that'd be pretty neat if I could if I could go on site and do a scuba gear and install it underwater somewhere, like an oil rig or something. I don't know. So and then to the last network product that we have, this is our flagship device. This is the EdgeIPS Pro. And so the EdgeIPS Pro is really intended for companies with a traditional IT style architecture. And this is more speaking to the physical layout. So I mentioned before that the last 2 devices, those are ruggedized devices. Those can go pretty much anywhere. This device here, this is more meant to be inside of a temperature control room or a data center, and it is rack mounted. So it would need to be a typical IT style environment to be installed into. Also, all of the cables within the environment for all the OT machines would have to come back to a central point to be able to connect all of your machines to this. But basically, this one device is the equivalent of that smaller EdgeIPS, but instead of just 1 pair of ports, you get 24 pairs. So it's basically 24 of that smaller device in one machine. So it'll give you either 24 devices that you can protect individually at a one-to-one level, or if you're above a switch, you can do VLAN protection or network group protection for 24 different network segments of the environment. And we have 2 different.
This would be similar to like an IDF where you'd have your independent distribution frame.
Yeah, it's not typically, I mean, it might look like a switch, but it's not going to be a switch.
Right, but it works kind of like that, but in the IPS format.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then where was I? So yeah, we have 2 different models. So this is the smaller one. This is a 1U device, which again does 24 network segments or 24 devices. And then we also have a 48 pair, which is basically double this. It's a 2U device. And that would give you 48 ports of protection depending on where you're installing it in the environment. But it has all the same features as that smaller EdgeIPS would have, but it takes all the features to the next level. Or even 2 levels past that. Specifically, like there's a bunch of different features, but one of them is that smaller EdgeIPS to the left there has hardware bypass. So if that machine was to go down, it'll still pass the network traffic to the machine downstream, so it's not impeding the operation of that machine. That's not configurable with that device. When we get into the EdgeIPS Pro, that feature is configurable. So you can control all of your port pairs and how you would want them to fail over. So you can say, 1 through 6 will fail open or fail safe, and then the rest of them will fail closed. So that way, if the device goes down, which devices will pass the traffic to the downstream machines, or which ones you would stop it there until you get this device back up and running. So that's just one of the examples of how the more features have within EdgeIPS. It just kind of takes everything to the next level. But the basic thing is that it has the added benefit of higher bandwidth, and then easier or less labor-intensive deployment, being that you're getting more networking control and visibility from one device rather than having to install many of them, if that makes sense. And go ahead and go to the next slide. And then so all of those edge devices that I just mentioned, or the network devices, have the ability to be used as standalone appliances, meaning that you can individually manage them, Or if you have an entire environment, we have customers that have hundreds of these or even thousands of those edge devices. So managing them individually would be very cumbersome. So what we would do is we would sync them to this, which is our OT Defense Console, and it's basically a centralized management device. And this would just make your life a lot easier by pushing out those new policies and the latest patterns from one location rather than having to update all of the TXOne nodes individually. And so this not only gives you visibility into the entire TXOne environment with the log aggregation, but it also gives you asset info on the machines that you're protecting. So our customers really like the asset detection features from the Edge series products. So you know, a lot of the people managing OT environments don't have the best visibility, and they're not sure what those machines are doing within that network. They might be remote to it. So the Edge products can help to passively pull asset info from the machines downstream. At a basic level, it's doing MAC addresses, host names, OSs, things like that. But then when we start diving into the OT side, we're able to see what sort of ICS device it is, whether it's a smart sensor, PLC, SCADA, HMI. And then also we can identify what's the vendor, you know, if it's a Rockwell PLC, what model number it is, what firmware it's running. So if there was a firmware vulnerability released, it's easy to use this to go back and see, okay, all of these are on this firmware. I need to update these, and all of these are good. We're up to date on those. So it makes it easier for the asset identification and then getting more visibility into what the OT machines are. So we can see when a device was first seen, when it was last seen, what protocols it's using, and then at what bandwidth, just giving visibility into the entire environment that we're protecting. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. And so this is where we kind of go on to the endpoint products, and Drager, this will be your learning as well for the Stellar stuff, since you were talking about SafeLock. So you know, starting with, actually both of these devices were specifically built for OT machines. So we made sure that it's using the least amount of system resources. They're very lightweight if you're comparing it to a traditional IT security. And then also we made sure that we're supporting the legacy operating system. So Stellar Enforce goes all the way back to Windows 2000, and then Stellar Protect goes back to Windows 7. And that's, both of them do the server sides as well. So Stellar Enforce, this is our lockdown software or our whitelisting application. And Enforce locks the machine down to only be allowed to perform its intended and approved functions. So after Enforce has been installed onto the machine, that machine will not be able to open any files or launch any applications that are not already on that approved list. So
what about if an application opens a file and that application's been whitelisted?
Yeah, so it's actually, you could do both, right? So you can do a rigid lockdown to where it won't let you add any files or change any files. Applications don't do that. Or you can use intelligent runtime. So intelligent runtime is just an intelligent module that can kind of sense, okay, you have an added approved application that's doing temporary files. It'll let that action take place, being that it'll be a little bit more flexible as far as
right. Yeah, I was thinking like 3D printers, you have to load up the design files and stuff into them. That's why I was asking. So.
Yeah, and then if it's something that's completely different, you would just set up a maintenance window or maintenance period, and you would make the changes that you need to, and then after you made the changes, you can update the approved list after it did a scan, just to make sure that there was no malware added while you were in a maintenance window.
Excellent.
So, and then it locks it down in 4 different ways. The first way is just kind of how we just discussed, it's locking it down by the operation, basically what files and applications it's supposed to be using. The second way is locking down the data. You know, there can be sensitive information on these machines, whether it's a program file, script files, things like that. So it's controlling what's happening to the data, whether you're able to edit it, whether you're able to move the file location, and then also it's preventing against deletion, whether it's accidentally or maliciously deleting it. So just controlling what's happening to the data. The third way we lock it down is by the configuration. So we know changing the settings of the machine can be very, very disruptive to the environment. So we make sure that any configuration or setting on the machine itself isn't able to be changed, you know, like changing the static IP address to something obscure. And then the last way we lock it down is the physical access to the machine via USB. We know there can be a lot of rogue USBs flying around. So if you were to plug a USB device into that asset, if that USB is not on the approved list, that USB will not be recognized. You won't be able to put files onto the machine or pull files from it. And so it basically gives you control over which USB devices or storage devices can be in your environment and allowed to run on a machine. And then both of these devices, or both Stellar Enforce and Protect, can be used as standalone agents, or you can do a client-server relationship with Stellar One and control both Enforce and Protect. And then when we're talking about Protect, or Stellar Protect, this is actually the world's first OT-specific endpoint AV. So Stellar Protect has all the same features as your traditional IT endpoint security would have, things like real-time scanning, vulnerability protection, behavior monitoring. But with Stellar Protect, since we built it for OT, we took it a step further for that. So we're able to understand what sort of ICS applications are running on it. We can see the script files. We can see the certificates that are running on it. And then also with OT machines, there could be harmful commands that aren't necessarily malicious, like a simple stop command to a PLC can be detrimental, or adding excessive chemicals to the water supply like we saw in Florida. Those are harmful commands that aren't necessarily malicious that your IT security wouldn't be able to block. So to prevent these types of attacks, we can do that in two different ways. So we can either import the script files or the command files into Stellar. So if we see anything that deviates from those, we can be alerted to it or prevent those commands. Or we can set up a learning mode, and we can learn the normal commands and actions that that machine would perform. So if we see anything that's abnormal, we can see those and we can prevent them if we set it up that way. Yeah, and then go ahead and go on to the next slide. And so this is, lastly, we have Trim Micro's Portable Security 3 device, which is a USB device that scans assets for malware, and it removes any objects that it finds to be malicious and quarantines it. And so this PS3 device does not require any software to be installed on the machine or the asset that it's protecting. We know this can be crucial because a lot of the vendors that provide OT machines will often void warranties or void support if that asset has any sort of external software or unapproved software installed onto that machine. So there's 3 different use cases that I've seen for this device that really help a customer. The first one is, I've actually seen where customers will leave these PS3 sticks plugged into assets at all times, and with the management program, they'll set up either on-demand scanning or scheduled scannings or scheduled scans. So it gives them a way to have regularly scanning AV on a machine without actually having to install the software and voiding those warranties. And then the other 2 use cases, one is to scan machines entering the physical environment, such as like a third-party vendor doing maintenance, or even an internal person doing maintenance, bringing in a laptop or a USB. So this would be a threat that starts at the very lowest level and would be a bottom-up infection. And if all you have is a high-level firewall or IPS, there's no stopping it. So what you would do is have this device scan those machines or scan those USB devices before they're able to connect to the network or connect to a machine specifically. So that way you can tell if they're infected already, either knowingly or unknowingly. And then the last use case is pretty much the most generic one, is just running around scanning machines that don't have any endpoint protection and just making sure that there's no malware already sitting on it.
So the edge devices are IPS essentially type solutions. We have the Stellar devices, which gives you lockdown and protection. There's AV solutions in their Portable Security 3. Are there any types of advanced engines, any of those next gen engines, such as behavior monitoring, PML, so on and so forth, in any of those products?
Sorry, my connection broke up. Can you say the question?
Oh, no problem. So between all the products we covered today, the Edge IPS and Fire and the Pro and the Stellar Protects and Portable Security, are there any types of advanced engines in any of them, or because I know you mentioned the Edge has IPS capabilities for the filters to protect laterally and ingress egress, but how about when it comes to AV solutions like in Protect or Portable Security? Do those have any advanced engines in them, the next gen engines?
Well, with Portable Security, no. It's basically just running our known.
But yeah, it's running on sticks, so I could see it'd be a little limited for that one. So
yeah. And then when we're talking about the Edge products, they have DPI, which is Deep Packet Inspection, and that's scanning from layer 2 all the way to layer 7 of the OSI. And so what's really specific about those, past what you would see in a traditional IT, IPS or firewall, is that again it's more built for the OT machines. It understands the OT exploits that a typical IT side wouldn't have. right? So that would be kind of different to what that would be doing. On the endpoint side, again, it's built for the OT machines, so it's using the least amount of system resources, and it's doing the learning, or it knows what the machine should be doing. I don't know if they're specifically modules per se, or advanced scanning, but it's just more of just how the product set was built, right? And the main thing is just availability, keeping these machines online, versus in IT, it's trying to keep confidentiality of those machines and that information.
I'd say if anything, that's more of a case than to load up Stellar and Force then too, which would lock it down. So that way you don't have to worry about the behavior monitoring or predictive machine learning. If you're locking it down to only what's on there can run, you don't have to worry about anything extra.
And that was the whole point of having two different options. Is if a company's looking more for traditional IT endpoint security for OT, we have that. And also it's easier to manage the Enforce because it's almost like a set it and forget it, lock it down, and your protection is the lockdown. And so that was the whole reason of having such an in-depth product suite, to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Are there any public-facing resources, white papers, or anything like that that our watchers or listeners can look up, or anything where, for example, we've protected X company against these threats based off this? There, those what's the word I'm looking for? Reference, like reference customers, white papers that we have out there. So where might they find them? So
if you go to TXOne-networks.com, it'll have all of the product data sheets and white papers. It has a lot of resources on there as far as use cases, and then it also speaks to the different verticals, whether it be manufacturing, power, oil and gas, building management, healthcare. And it speaks to all the different verticals and gives you information about it. But yeah, TXOne Networks would be the website would be the best place to go and get more information from.
And it is TXOne-networks.com, you said?
Correct.
Perfect. All right. Well, I can't think of any other questions. Is there anything else? I didn't see anything else come in that I asked in chat. So if there is nothing else, anything else you'd like to mention in the case of TXOne, anything that might be coming down the pipe within the next quarter that people can look forward to? That's publicly shareable, I should say. Anything, like I said, they might be able to look forward to within the next quarter or by the end of the year that you know about?
Not that I can speak publicly on, no.
Okay. And that's fine. I understand not everything is publicly speakable. So,
yeah.
All right. So Austin and Michael, I thank you for your time. I thank you informing us about the TXOne network product line, the different products such as the EdgeIPS, the EdgeFire, the Pro, the Stellar products, and Portable Security 3. I know I've worked specifically with Portable Security 3 with one of my customers. I would have to say, working for Trend, that's probably one of the easiest products I think I've ever sold, to be honest. But it was very very good and very useful product for this particular customer, what they were using it for. So I'm glad to see that it's moved up to version 3 and has more capabilities than when I first started working with it. But again, thank you guys for your time. Thank you for our attendees for joining. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am available out there on the webs, or you can send a message through YouTube when you see this video, anything along those lines. And I'll be happy to get that sent to the correct person to get those questions answered for you. With that, have a good remainder of your Thursday. And we'll see you next month for our next topic. Keep an eye out on our meetup and keep an eye out for emails of what might be coming down the pipe. Again, thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.